Tracy Dixon, transmitting to you from the All Fiction Podcast Studios. Thanks for tuning in to the Steeger Classic Pulp Podcast, presented by Steeger Books, the purveyors of quality facsimiles and reprints of classic pulp magazines and story anthologies. Need more pulp? Visit SteegerBooks.com. You'll find a nifty promo code in this episode's description. Remember to follow our shows so you don't miss a single episode. Following us and leaving us a comment helps your podcast provider find us and suggest our shows to other listeners. And please be sure to click that share button. We'd appreciate it. Previously on By Night They Creep. After encountering a green-skinned monster in Blackwater Swamp, Paul Lawton discovered the creature was a missing townsman and soon fell victim to the deadly green plague himself. As more victims vanished and evidence pointed to a campaign of vengeance tied to the long-imprisoned Raoul Graham, a blood-written warning arrived from the darkness, and a man was slain by an Indian arrow. Now the plague is spreading. Lois Graham's mother is dead, and Dr. Jonathan Graham has disappeared into the night, drawing Lawton toward a final reckoning. As we rejoin the story, Paul Lawton and a group of townsmen are entering Blackwater Swamp. Chapter 5, Master of Monsters. 8 men, all of whom had been on the previous expedition into the bowels of Blackwater Swamp, were in the group that formed as a result of Paul Lawton's wild plan. 8 gaunt-faced men followed him on this second perilous probe of Blackwater's secrets. Storm wind wailed shrilly through high trees bordering the graveyard. Rain rode on the wind and lashed the bent bodies of the men who trudged stolidly through sinister darkness. In such gloom, the feeble glow of flashlights was less than nothing. It had taken longer than Lawton had expected to round up the vigilantes. The hour was late now. Gazing down from the railroad embankment into that evil terrain of monster-ridden darkness below him, he wondered dully how many of the searchers would come out of Blackwater alive. On a night like this, the swamp would surely take its toll, even without the added menace of living, dead horribles. Nevertheless, it was Lawton who led the way, plunging into knee-deep water and stumbling recklessly forward, clinging to gnarled stumps and tangled creepers that lay in his path. The others splashed behind, each man choosing his own path. Conversation was limited to a minimum. The flickering gleam of many searchlights transformed the swamp into a world of monstrous shadows and pits of bottomless gloom. Somewhere in this strange world of evil, Jonathan Graham had been lured to impending doom. Lawton was sure of it. And somewhere in the bowels of Blackwater Swamp lay the secret of the relentless green plague which had swept Rillwood. Unless he discovered that secret soon, it would be too late. He stumbled on, avoiding the deeper pools that might have no bottom. The searchlight in his fist sent a streak of livid light ahead of him, disclosing gaunt trees that had human shape, clumps of dead, twisted brush that glared out at him hungrily. No man could be unafraid in such surroundings. Time and again he stumbled, went down, sprawling. His drenched clothes clung to him with a clammy tenacity that made his flesh crawl. On every side, the wail of storm wind was a banshee howling that spoke of impending horrors, and the drip of falling rain ate its way like the ceaseless ticking of a phantom clock into Lawton's soul. The thought grew within him that this was purgatory. He and the others who splashed along behind him, some distance behind now because they had failed to keep up with his reckless pace, were lost souls stumbling through the valley of the shadow. Here were things beyond the darkest dreams of man. Things spawned in a nethermost hell and undying through the ages. Darkness and horror and despair, and a lurid, shrieking terror that filtered through every pore of a man's body, robbing him of courage, filling him with a mad urge to turn and race wildly from unseen demons of the dark. How he became isolated from the others, he was not sure. But when he came at last to that place in the soul of the swamp where twin cables reached out across a bottomless morass, the sound of human voices had died to silence, and he was utterly alone in a world of black terror. Fear stilled the beating of his heart as he gazed about him. He stood still, listening, hoping against hope to hear even the distant splashing of human feet. But no human sound came through the gloom. There was only the ceaseless drip of the rain, the eerie moaning of storm wind in the tops of tall trees. Alone! The thought spiked him with terror, and he clutched the searchlight as a drowning man might clutch a spar. Every fiber of his being shrieked at him to go back before it was too late. But he choked back the scream that filled his throat, and slowly, step by step, pushed forward. There could be no turning back now. The Green Death had claimed him. Its evil virus was in his blood. Here in the reek and darkness and creeping horror of Blackwater Swamp lay his last hope of life. Slime-covered water sucked about his ankles as he reached out to grip the lower of the two cables. Those cables had seemed a perilous sort of bridge before. Now, reaching into a darkness as of the grave, they were a gateway to some mysterious hell. But he would have to cross them in order to reach the island. With a sudden hoarse cry, Lawton pulled his hand free and stood stiff. The cable had jerked in his fingers as if alive. He shrank back, his eyes bulging in their sockets. For a moment, blind terror whipped through him. He suppressed a mad desire to scream for help. Then, slowly, he raised the searchlight in his hand and aimed its far-reaching beam out across the morass. The beam traveled along the cables and came to a convulsive stop. Lawton's blood froze. A hoarse cry gurgled in his throat. In the round white eye of the searchlight, a slender, drenched figure clung precariously to the wires. That figure, dangling above the vile darkness of the morass, was Jonathan Graham's daughter. Lawton screamed, flung himself forward. He had been afraid to cry out before, even in an attempt to locate his companions. Undue noise might attract the hell-born denizens of the swamp. Now, gaping in sheer horror at the girl on the cables, he shrieked her name so violently that the sound cackled back to him in 1,000 lurid echoes.
Lois! Lois! For God's sake, come back! Come back! Come back! Come back!
She had been worming her way along, sliding her small feet along the lower cable and gripping the top one for support. Now she hesitated, turned her head to stare at him, and her face in the glare of the searchlight was white as the face of a corpse. But even at that distance, he saw the expression of determination that iced her features. And she did not stop.
Come back! Come back! Come back! Come back! Come back! Come back! Come back!
He wailed.
Don't go to the island! You don't know!
His screams had no effect. Deliberately, she continued her advance. More than half the distance lay behind her, and she had passed the deepest part of the morass that yawned beneath. Now she did not look back, but centered her attention on the dangerous task before her. Slowly, inches at a time, she moved along the swaying cables. Blindly, Lawton lurched forward, swung himself onto the wires, and went after her. But after taking 4 frantic steps, he stopped, sobbed with the realization of his defeat. He could not follow. God alone knew how much weight the ancient cables would support. If he blundered along them, the additional burden of his weight might cause the rotted wires to snap. And then that slender, lovely shape would go hurtling down into the sucking embrace of the swamp. God, he could do nothing. Racked with mental torment, he could only stand and watch her until she reached her objective. And by the time he reached the island, she would be gone. Gone into a fearsome hell where not more than half a score of human beings had set foot in the past dozen years. Again and again he screamed the girl's name, begged her to come back. His voice became a hoarse, inhuman wailing that frightened him, but the girl refused to halt. Slowly she went on, until at last the morass lay behind her, and she was over solid ground. Then, reaching the end of the cables, she swung herself over, hung at arm's length, and dropped. At the same instant, a monstrous green shape lurched out of the darkness and fell upon her. Bloated arms encircled the girl's middle, crushed her into a foul embrace. Just once she screamed. The sound was a soul-tearing note of terror that went wailing with banshee eeriness through the swamp's desolation. And as Paul Lawton stared with horrified eyes, she was dragged away into crawling underbrush, beyond the beam of the searchlight that had shown him every frightful detail of her fate. With a wild cry, Lawton hurled himself along the cables. Terror blinded him to the fact that he was doing the very same thing she had done, plunging into unseen dangers from which he could not retreat. Blindly, he heaved himself forward, and the searchlight jammed in his pocket cast a livid streak of white light into the rain-filled darkness above him. Not once did he look down, even when the weight of his surging body caused the cables to sway perilously above a bubbling, gurgling well of black slime. His thoughts were on the girl he loved, the girl who had been dragged away before his eyes into some lurid hell where a hideous fate awaited her. Weakened by his efforts, he reached the end of his frantic journey and leaped to the ground. Without hesitating even to look around, he flung himself into the matted tangle of underbrush where Lois had vanished. He did not see the uncouth shapes that loomed out of darkness behind him, did not hear the sounds of their headlong attack until they were already upon him. Then he had no chance. A wave of writhing green bodies cascaded over him, crushing him to earth. Clawing hands raked his face and throat, subdued his flailing arms. Breath choked in his mouth. A stench of unutterable foulness invaded his nostrils, nauseating him. He struggled for air and found none. Blackness more intense than the gloom of the swamp night surged through his laboring brain, and with the blackness came agony. Once again, the green virus had mingled with the hot blood in his veins, bringing a torment born in hell. And this time he could not fight it. His writhing body was in the grip of savage hands, and he was being dragged along sodden ground toward the evil blackness that marked the center of the island. He did not lose consciousness, despite the vicious manhandling of his weird captors. The torment within him was greater than any torment inflicted by cruel hands that raked his body. Liquid fire ran in his veins. Then, as before, the agony subsided, leaving him limp and weak, as though the blood in his battered body had thinned to water. Where were his captors taking him? It made no difference. No matter what their intent, this was the end. First, Jonathan Graham had fallen into their clutches, then Lois, and now. He tried to turn his head to stare about him, but the agony had drained him of all strength. The searchlight in his pocket was still on, the silver beam angled upward to reveal green-glowing ghoul faces gaunt with plague. The hands that held him were emaciated claws, bony and horrible. He ceased to struggle, knowing that he must preserve what little strength he had left. At times, when his captors slopped through knee-deep pools of stagnant water, an oily slime spilled over him, and he shuddered as from the loathsome touch of something long dead. Yet the cool water helped revive him, cleared his blurred senses. When at last the way sloped downward and the darkness of night was blotted out by walls of black earth, Lawton's eyes were wide and his senses alert for any opportunity to escape. He knew that his captors had dragged him through a cairn of jagged rocks and into the yawning mouth of a tunnel. He knew that he was being hauled now through a subterranean passage that led probably to some underground cavern. Here in below-ground darkness, the air was cold. Dampness crept into his body and stiffened his muscles. Such dampness would soon bring a recurrence of the agony. Then, already weakened by the blows of his captors, he would have no resistance, nothing left with which to fight the torment. When the agony came again, death would come with it. What had become of the vigilantes who had accompanied him into the swamp? Where were Mowry, Ralph Kinney, Vincent Graham, and the others? Had they, too? A pale yellow glow startled him out of his thoughts, and with wide eyes he stared ahead. Above him, the roof of the tunnel arched down. Just ahead, the walls widened. The passage angled out into a subterranean chamber. Into that chamber, the swamp demons dragged him and flung him against a wall. Then he stared, and his eyes filled with dread. No antechamber of hell could have been more spectral, more sinister than this one. Far below the surface of the swamp, in the bowels of an island which evidently possessed a foundation of volcanic rock, the cavern was a mystic chamber of eerie shadows. Its uneven floor sloped into rock walls that reared grotesquely to a low dome. Walls and floor and ceiling were beaded with seeping moisture from the swamp, and the monsters of Blackwater had made this sunken vault their gathering place. More than half a score of them squatted uncouthly on the stone floor, gaunt, green-skinned horribles that no longer resembled human beings. Yet they had been human. Gaping at them, Lawton saw faces that were vaguely recognizable. These were the men who, after being attacked by the green plague, had subsequently vanished from the town. Then Lawton's gaze fell upon another horror. Against the cavern's far wall, dimly visible in the eerie light of smoking lanterns, hung a near-naked figure whose flesh was white, not green. Iron shackles encircled the man's wrists and ankles. From the sag of his body, it was evident that he was either dead or unconscious. Lawton stared, groaned with relief when he saw the man's naked chest rise and fall with the labor of breathing. The captive was not dead. Not yet. But his near-naked body was drenched with sweat. The man was Jonathan Graham. This, then, was the answer to Graham's mysterious disappearance. But where was Lois? Where? Into Lawton's range of vision came a slowly moving object that became a lodestone for his gaze. For no reason that he could understand, a wave of revulsion crawled over him. He shrank back against the wall, shuddering. This new monster was somehow unlike the others. The others were slaves. This was the master. Every move the creature made as he strode into the center of the vault and stood wide-legged, arms folded on his greenly hideous chest, branded him as the leader of the clan. And something about him was disturbingly familiar. Something about that thin, discolored face with its luminous eyes. Then, because the monster turned and gazed silently into a dark corner of the cavern, Lawton turned too. There in the gloom, something stirred, moaned half-audibly in torment. But the glow of the lanterns did not reveal what lay there. The ghoul swung about, peered intently at Lawton. Guttural commands spewed from his green mouth. Other demons snaked forward. Claw-like hands dragged Lawton erect and pushed him against the wall, where iron shackles awaited him. He had no strength to fight. The rusty shackles snapped shut, holding him erect. Cruel fingers tore the clothes from his body, stripped him to the waist. The nearness of those frightful faces filled him with revulsion. Slowly, the demons returned to their places, and their leader's gaze went triumphantly from Lawton to that other bound figure. His obscene lips writhed open, and he stepped toward the drooping form of Jonathan Graham.
And how does the great physician feel now?
The words were thick with gloating, vile as the lips that spat them forth. But Graham's only response was to raise his head wearily and return the monster's stare. His silence wiped the leer from that lurid countenance. The fiend's fingers raked out, left a welt on Graham's face.
Answer me. How does it feel to stand on the threshold of death?
Graham's answer came with studied indifference, as if he had steeled himself to give no exhibition of fear.
I am very tired. Death will be a welcome relief from the vileness of you and your methods.
The death that I have prepared for you will be no relief.
Savagely, the green ghoul stepped back, stood, blaring. Then, snarling deep in his throat, he strode into darkness, returned an instant later with an oblong metal box, which he placed on the floor between the sprawled feet of one of his squatting followers. From the box, his green glowing hands lifted a strip of rubber bandage, a hypodermic needle. Aware that Graham would realize the significance of such tools, he jerked his head around, leered up into his victim's tense face. That face had lost color. The doctor's unblinking eyes watched every move of the fiend's hands. Chuckling vilely, the monster proceeded with his task. His fingers pawed the shrunken arm of the emaciated body of the ghoul before him. He took blood from that body, yet the stupefied creature made no whimper of complaint. Rising, the monster master took slow steps forward and stood again before Jonathan Graham.
The great Rilwood physician would probably consider this a crude method of giving a blood transfusion, no?
His lips curled in an evil sneer.
But it will do. And when I am finished with you, you will know what it means to suffer. The green death will run to every part of your agonized body. These other slaves of mine...
Indifferently, he swung his arm to include the assemblage of emaciated, staring creatures who had once been human.
...have suffered so long that they no longer feel the pain, except in recurring waves. but you are unprepared. You will go through hell.
He stepped back, studied Graham with eyes that gleamed their triumphant passion.
That is what I intend to do. Send you through hell. Look at me, Jonathan Graham. You don't know me. The hell that I went through had something to do with altering my appearance. A series of surgical operations over a period of years finished the task.
He swung about, aimed a trembling arm at the green-skinned horribles who watched him in frightful fascination.
Look at them, gibbering idiots, vile with disease. It was they who ruined my life, sent me to prison for murders that I committed in the name of science. They robbed the world of a genius. And you helped them. You, my own brother. Ever since the hour of my escape, I have looked forward to this moment. Now it is your turn to walk in hell.
Across the room, Paul Lawton watched in horror and could not close his eyes. Hell? But if that needle were emptied into Graham's bloodstream, the agony would go straight to the heart.
Well, why don't you scream for mercy?
The master glared triumphantly into Graham's wide eyes.
Are you fool enough to think yourself immune to the disease? You should know better, after spending sleepless nights trying to discover a cure for it.
Low laughter gurgled in his throat.
There is a cure, my dear Jonathan. You nearly stumbled upon it. Had you included a small quantity of ferric hydroxide and lime water? Why don't you scream for mercy? Damn you. Scream!
That concludes Part 5 of the Steeger Classic Pulp Podcast presentation of Hands Beyond the Grave, brought to you by SteegerBooks.com. Tune in next time for the thrilling conclusion. This AI repertory theater production was produced and directed by Keith Bryan Shaw. Please take a moment to let us know in the comments if you enjoy this type of story. For now, this is Tracy Dixon signing off. Thanks for listening.